Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. Let it all hang out. DNA brings cigar people out. The artistic, so gifted. African ancestry gets it. Yes, they black owned for the people. In the roots, they will find your sequel. Genetic test in the process, peaceful. Reunite, multiply with your equals. Black scientists, research it. Invest in that time, you're worth it. Experience feels so perfect. Get on the right path to your purpose. No other in the industry like this. Find your link to a tribe, precise kit. The Mende people, Mandinka, Volanta, the house. I wanna know ya. Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. AfricanAncestry.com, the pioneers in genetic tracing for black people. Since 2003, doing what no other in the industry can do by tracing your DNA to the present day African country, ethnic group, or tribe. What better time than now to find out where you came from? Order your kit today.
Hello, everybody. Hello and welcome. I'm Gina Page, CEO and co-founder of AfricanAncestry.com. As you know, we are the pioneers of genetic ancestry tracing for Black people around the world, and we are on a mission to transform the way we view ourselves and the way we view Africa. And we do that through DNA. What's up, Fancy Patterson in the house with us, David Brown, Mary Smith, hello, Sycus, good to see you. Herman Baker, of course, is always representing. Welcome, come on in. I am hyped. You know how I feel about Wednesdays with you all and African Ancestry Lives. And tonight is no exception. It's about to be Black History Month. Can you all believe it's February already? Well, it's not February yet, but in a few more days, it's going to be February on Monday. And we go all out for Black History Month. Although we celebrate Kwanzaa all year round in African Ancestry, we celebrate Black History all year round at African Ancestry. But I'm excited because we're going to be doing a Remember Who You Are takeover. So you know that every month we've been celebrating the people, places, and spaces over the past 1,000-year continuum that have informed who we are. And we believe strongly that when you understand where you're from, then you can know where you're going. And all of that helps you to better understand who you are. And so this month, we're celebrating Cuba and all things Cuban. Next month is all things African ancestry. Next month, can anybody guess? Drop in the comments if you know what anniversary this will be for us next month. I want to see in the comments who knows which anniversary we'll be celebrating next month. LJ, good to see you. Hey, Avanti, welcome. Yeah, I want to see in the comments if you guys know which anniversary African ancestry will be celebrating next month. You got it, Avanti. 18 years. African ancestry is like my teenager who's going off to college. So when we talk about remembering who you are, we're celebrating everybody who has used DNA to remember where in Africa they come from. So it's going to be an African ancestry complete takeover. Mary Smith, we're 17 right now. We'll be 18 next month. Welcome, Menelik. So as I mentioned, this month we've been celebrating Cuba and the heritage of the legendary Celia Cruz. We've highlighted a museum in Cuba, in Havana, called El Callejón de Hamel. I hope I pronounced that right. And rumba music. And when we were looking at who could come on to share the African influence on Latin music. Uh, a very good friend of mine, Will Calhoun, said, Gina, I before I could even finish the sentence, like, do you know? He was like, Bobby Sanabria. Bobby Sanabria. That's it. That's who you want. And I had no idea. I'm like, he says Bobby Sanabria, that's who we want. Let me tell you something. We are in for a real energetic, informative concert lesson tonight. He's bringing it. He's bringing it all to us. Plachette's in the house. You're here just in time, Plachette, and then Iola's with us. Welcome everybody. You're just in time for Bobby Sanabria. So I'm just gonna listen. I could spend 10 minutes reading his bio, but I'm gonna share some of the key points. Um, he is a native son of the South Bronx, born to Puerto Rican parents. He has performed and recorded with every major figure in the world of Latin jazz and salsa. That's who we get here at African Ancestry. We get legends, every major figure in the world of Latin jazz and salsa. In 2006, he was inducted into the Bronx Hall of Walk of Fame. Every single one of his big band recordings, there have been 7 of them, have been nominated for Grammys. We're not playing. I tell y'all every week, we are not playing. In 2019, he won the Record of the Year from the Jazz Journalists Association. And then he took some of the proceeds from that, from those sales, to donate to the Jazz Foundation of America's Puerto Rico Relief Fund for musicians. His lifetime dedication is to spreading the history and culture of jazz and Latin jazz to the general public, that would be us, through performing. And he's also an educator to a new generation of musicians. And if that's not enough, he's the co-artistic director of the Bronx Music Heritage Center. So I want you guys, exactly, all snap. This sounds so exciting. Hand claps, everything for Mr. Bobby Sanabria. Welcome, Bobby.
How are you? How are you? Hello to everybody.
It is an honor. It is an
Thank you.
absolute honor to be with you, to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you. It's an honor for me, a privilege. And y para todo el mundo que está sintonizado aquí, que hablan español, saludo y mucho H. Much positive energy to you. I'm so glad that I'm here. And I have to thank my brother from another mother, Will Calhoun, the great drummer from Living Color, who's an SOB like me, a son of the Bronx. So thank you to Will for recommending me to Gina. And I'm more than happy to talk about the topic at hand, which is the African influence on Cuban music. And of course, one of our grand dames, if not the greatest, the one and only Celia Cruz from Cuba. Yeah.
And I understand that you knew her and that you played with her. I don't know if I told you this, but we actually traced her African roots. We traced her maternal ancestry. So we used her niece Celia, her daughter's sister, and we traced her maternal line all the way back over 500 years ago to the country of Guinea-Bissau and the Balanta people.
Wow.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the Balanta people is that means those who resist. And I feel like she had a very positive spirit of resistance in terms of not changing and staying true to who she is and was, staying true to her culture. Tell me, how would you describe in a nutshell, because I know we could talk about this all night, the impact that Celia Cruz had on music?
Well, just from that point of view, what you said about resistance, Celia was a symbol of Black pride, not only for Cubans, but for people of African ancestry all over Latin America. And really, when we talk about African ancestry, we're talking about not only Latin America, but obviously the United States, et cetera, et cetera. I always joke because it's been proven by science that civilization all comes from Africa. So we are all African in a sense. But of course, culturally, many of us don't know the ties that bind us together. And I talk about, we talked a little bit about this off camera. It's like you're in a big giant house and there's all these rooms. But if you stay in one room, you don't get to see what's happening in the other rooms. But even though we're all contained in that house. So the more we learn about each other, the more we find out our common bonds in and amongst themselves. I always say, although we live in a country, the United States, where everything is judged, unfortunately, in the mainstream by color. But what unites us all really is culture. So when I was growing up in the South Bronx, it wasn't a strange thing for me to dig James Brown or Gladys Knight and the Pips. And of course, dig Maestro Tito Puente, Machito, Tito Rodriguez, Maestra Celia Cruz. And for us, Celia was a visible connection right away to our African ancestry. She was very, as everybody knows, statuesque. She was beautiful. And that voice that she had, it was like a clarion call to all of us. And in some of the examples that I've picked out from YouTube that everybody can have access to later on if they want to review them, she demonstrated not only her mastery of all the forms of Cuban music, but also as well, she was an incredible entertainer and just so classy. I got to work with her several times in New Orleans, backing her up. I worked on the Mambo King soundtrack. I was the drummer and timbala player on that album from the soundtrack for that movie. That was the first movie that Antonio Banderas did in the United States. And when we were recording the album, she did several tracks, and I'm there with her, and it was just great. She was always very friendly. Of course, she was always accompanied by her husband, Pedro Knight, who was a handsome black man from Cuba. He was a trumpet player at one time with the great Sonora Matancera. Everybody has to know this group because this group was founded in 1924 in Matanzas, Cuba. And she recorded over 74 albums with this group. Just incredible. And that's how she came to the public's attention, through this group, the Sonora Matancera. And Pedro was the second trumpet player in the group. He played second trumpet. They fell in love, and the rest is history, you know? So, and when I talk about the whole gamut of Cuban music, I'm talking about the song tradition, which is the music that was born in Eastern Cuba, the fusion of Southern Spanish and West African and Central African rooted rhythms. Song means folk song, and it is the foundation of what we call today salsa. Salsa is basically the way we play the music in New York City, especially the Puerto Rican community, and in Puerto Rico. And we've added one of the things that we added as Puerto Ricans in the 1940s was jazz harmony and arranging technique. But we can get into that much later on. But Cuba and Puerto Rico have always been like brothers and sisters, always. There's a famous poem by Lola Rodriguez de Tio that says, Cuba y Puerto Rico son las dos alas de un solo pájaro. Las dos reciben flores, las dos reciben balas. Cuba and Puerto Rico are two wings of one bird. Both receive roses and they both receive bullets as well. Wow. So so our connection with our Cuban brothers and sisters, it's like we're one. It's an amazing thing. But of course, like in any cultural situations, it's like the Yankees versus the Boston Red Sox. You know, you get in these little territorial disputes, but I always refer to the great Francisco Raúl Gutiérrez Grillo de Ayala, Machito, who was a great vocalist, and Mario Baza, who I used to play with in his big band. They formed a big band in 1939, the Machito Afro-Cubans in New York City, and they were the first ones to fuse jazz arranging technique with the power and inventiveness of the jazz soloist from African-American tradition with the complexity and excitement of Afro-Cuban rhythm. So Afro-Cuban jazz, the first form of Latin jazz, wasn't born in Cuba, it was born in New York City. And Machito always used to say, mira, si quieres que alguien te toque la música cubana bien, Búscate un puertorriqueño de Nueva York o de Puerto Rico que hasta tocan la música mejor y hasta la bailan mejor. Listen, if you want somebody to play you good Cuban music, find yourself a Puerto Rican from New York or from the island of Puerto Rico because they dance the music and even play it better than many Cubans.
Wow.
I'll
You
just
know,
leave it at that.
there's one thing that I did not mention, which is that you are a drummer, you are a percussionist. So I'm just admiring all of the equipment there with you, and I know you're going to share that with us. But I have to do this shout out
Sure.
because it seems that Professor Ramos's class is in the house. We've got at Sabaranath is here, Vanessa is here. Catherine is here, Nick is here, Haley is here, Gabby is here, Nicole is here, Poonam is here. It sounds like Prashi is here. It sounds like Professor Ramos's entire class is here. So they, like me, are ready for a lesson.
Great. Well, that's what you need. People for rumba. And the word rumba comes, the etymology of it, where the word comes from, it comes from the Bantu Congolese word from West Central Africa, lumba, which means to get down or to affirm. Okay, it's one of the forms of Cuban music that's very prominent in terms of what we call salsa today, and it's one of the forms of music that also you're judged by as a drummer in terms of your knowledge. Before we get into that, let's go all the way back to Africa, the birthplace of our rhythms. Whether you're playing New Orleans second line, funk, whether you're playing trip hop, whatever, or you're playing salsa, rock and roll, whatever, the birthplace of our rhythms is Africa, okay? So we have three main nations that exist and permeate Cuban music and the rest of the Caribbean. We're talking about Efik culture from southern Nigeria. From Efik culture, we get words like bongo, which means not only this instrument here, the bongo, which is the Efik word for drum or the truth, and the bongocero in a salsa orchestra must speak the truth when they converse. Okay, you're gonna hear me tapping out the central rhythmic gravity point, the clave, and everything I do has to be in relation to the clave as a bongocero when you're playing in a salsa orchestra. Now, this instrument is not African because it is what we call un instrumento criollo. It means it's a Creole instrument. It was born on the island, the colony of Cuba at that time. It was a colony of Spain in the eastern part of the island. But it was given the name bongo, the Efik word, which means drum, bongo, B-O-N-K-O, and then it got Spanified into bongo. But the word also means truth. So the bongocero must speak the truth when they do repiques, conversations in a salsa orchestra. For example, we have the basic pattern, the martillo. And then the bongocero, within the structure of the melody, converses. That's how the bongo functions in a salsa orchestra. Now, the thing that I was just doing, these repiques, come from the tradition of the rumba, okay? Which Celia Cruz was a master at, and she was also a master of the song tradition. But she was also a master of African song form. particularly the Yoruba tradition. Now, in the Yoruba tradition from West Africa, the Yoruba basically became the most influential group in Cuba. They are from Nigeria, okay? Why did they become the most influential group? Because they were the last ones, unfortunately, brought over in chains to the island, particularly in the 19th century in massive numbers. There are other groups that came before, particularly the Bantu Congolese from West and Central Africa. And from them, we get this drum, the conga drum, which is descended from a large drum from Bantu Congo tradition called ngome. But the way the shape of the drum is today, the techniques we use, their roots are in Africa, the rhythms are rooted in Africa, but other things happen in Cuba to advance this African-rooted drum into another state. But let me give you an example of some of the things that we inherited from West Africa, from rhythmically. From West Africa, we inherited three things. We inherited polyrhythm, many rhythms at the same time. I have one rhythm. I have another rhythm. I have another rhythm. And of course, I have the human voice. It's a beautiful song for Oya, the deity in the Yoruba pantheon, who is the, we could say she's the goddess of the cemetery, the whirlwind, etc., etc. Right? And this religion that we inherited from Yoruba tradition is known as Ifa, the sacred truths. But when it was brought over to Cuba during the colonial period, it survived colonialism. Why? Because the Spanish were very smart, in a sense. The black population on the island of Cuba and the rest of the Caribbean, etc., it could 8 to 1, 10 to 1, etc. They allowed manumission. In other words, if you were a Spaniard and you had a child with somebody of African descent, that child achieved manumission. Okay? And of course, they carried the culture from Spain, the culture from West Africa, and the Spanish allowed African languages to be spoken on the island of Cuba. I might say to you, like in Bantu Congolese, "Oye, abre kutigwini and tinga mambo." Listen to the mambo that I have to sing for you. Mambo, the Bantu Congolese word for a song or a chant that repeats over and over again. And what we call lengua bosal, a fusion of Spanish and, in this case, Bantu Congolese. Or somebody comes up to you and say, "Oye, ache alafia onyi, ache positive energy, alafia, peace be unto you." And you would respond to me, "Motu bue." Now somebody might say that to the darkest of dark in Cuba. And why would that be? Because it's about culture. The culture is permeating throughout everybody, okay? You might not be a practitioner of the religion Ifa, which became known as Santeria in Cuba, because there was syncretization between Catholic deities and West African rooted Yoruba deities, because they wanted to mask the fact that they were still worshiping their deities. But you're exposed to it, and it's in the air. It's there, okay? And words like ache, bongo become part of the parlance of everyday colloquial Spanish in Cuba. I'll give you another example. The word chévere. Anybody that's watching this that speaks Spanish uses that word all the time. Chévere. It is the effic word for somebody who's elegant. Elegant. Okay? Cool and down. So we use it all the time. Gee, I'll see you on 42nd Street and 5th Avenue at 4 o'clock. And you answer me, all right, chévere, Bobby, see you later, man. Okay?
I feel like isn't there a line in a Stevie Wonder song where he's kind of riffing and doesn't he say
He says that.
chévere,
He says that.
chévere? Yeah.
Yeah, he says that. It is in
I never
Spanish.
knew what he was saying. I just
Yeah.
knew the okay.
He got that hanging out with people like Ray Barretto and other New Yorkers in New York City. So, but chévere is not a Spanish word. It's African. Just like the word mambo that I said before. It's not Spanish. It's a Bantu Congolese word. It's a song that repeats over and over again, like in mambo music, for example. Let me just fix this right here because it's clanging along. The clave, the central rhythmic gravity point that we inherited from West Africa. Oye, qué rico, más bueno, para que puedan gozar. Oye, qué rico, más bueno, para que puedan bailar. Mambo, mambo, qué rico, ya mi mambo, mambo. Oye, mambo, mambo, qué rico, mambo. Okay? So, Africa lives in our music, obviously in the drum, because the Spanish allowed drumming in Cuba, all right? They allowed intermarriage in Cuba. They had studied the treatises of the ancient Romans on how to treat their conquered peoples. Of course, Rome at one time ruled all of Europe at one time. And in their documents, they talked about, instead of like treating the conquered peoples badly, et cetera, of course, they had to be submissive to whoever was the Caesar at the time. But at the same time, they realized we don't want any revolutions to be happening, et cetera. So the Spanish did that. They studied that, and they realized, well, if we start having cabildos on the island of Cuba, these social clubs based on the ancient social clubs that existed in southern Spain, we can control these people a little bit better. They're not wanting to maybe possibly revolt. Let them play their music on Sundays after church, etc. Everybody by law had to learn Spanish, had to learn how to read and write so they could read the Bible and be loyal to the king and queen of Spain. Okay. So they set up the perfect scenario for Africa to be reborn on the island. And of course, it happened in Brazil. It happened in Haiti. It happened to a certain extent in Puerto Rico, where my ancestral homeland is, et cetera. But the main thing is the drum permeates. All right. Now, the rhythm I played before is from Yoruba tradition. It's known as bembe. Obviously, I'm playing all the parts. Actually, all the parts would be like this. And I'll sing the cowbell at the same time. I'll try. I'll see if I can do it. Let me see. I got to put this drum over here. So we have the clave, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, this is the main thing, one of the main things that we inherited from Western Central Africa, this rhythm. There's another form of clave I'll talk about that's used in the music that we call son or salsa today. So those are all the parts for what we call bembe.
So
right?
wait, I have a question. So would one person be playing all of the parts typically?
No.
Okay, you're doing that for demonstration purposes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's one of the contributions of Cuba. They developed in Cuba this technique of using your left hand. like a hinge to be able to get different sounds, and it allows you to play multiple drums as well, and it allows you to fill in and make the rhythm nice and tight. For example, if I play a basic rhythm that we use in salsa, a tumbao, a repetitive rhythm for what we call mambo, right? Most of the time when you're dancing, you'll be hearing just this. But what makes that swing is this. My left hand, okay? Well, and when the two hands are interacting like that, is what we call masacote, okay? So the way you judge a conga player, next time you see a conga player, look at their left hand. If their left hand is not happening, say, well, this cat needs to get some things together.
So hold on, Bobby.
Or it could be a woman as well.
Right. So at one point you moved your camera down just a little, and so now the top of your head is cut off, and
Okay.
I feel like we want to see your whole.
Sure.
It's just a smidge. If you could turn it back up to,
That's
great.
You can see the drums. Now, besides the drums, we have these things. Instruments that we inherited from West Africa, from Yoruba tradition. Shekere. It's found also in other parts of Africa, but mostly in Yoruba tradition. So, the kachimbo is the most important one because that keeps the downbeats and everybody glued together. So, I'm going to do the clave again. So, that's a combination of a shaker and a drum. Okay, then we have the
So I'm going to ask another question for people who may be wondering. So you're playing the clave with your foot, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just for demonstration purposes.
Right.
Okay, now we have the second shekere, which is also known as mula or segunda. Okay, so, and to give you another reference point, I'll just do the downbeats with my other foot. So this is in what we call the meter 6/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And then the final shekere is what we call the caja, C-A-J, the J-A, the box. That shekere gets to talk. On top of those other 4 drums that I was playing for you before, and the bell that I was singing with my voice. Okay, again, I'll give you another reference point. Now remember what I talked about before. One of the things we inherited from Africa is polyrhythm, many rhythms at the same time. Another thing that we inherited from Africa is polymeter. Okay, I was counting in 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But you could count this 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. With the clave.
Listen, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm sitting here in awe. You're using every part of your body to play all of these instruments. And just as an average person sitting back, we hear all this rhythm and don't always know what goes into it. So I really appreciate the way you're breaking this down for us. And it's almost like you're demystifying the music in a very powerful way.
Thank you. But you know what? We all do this all the time. The fact that you're talking to me, moving your hands, that's 2 things at the same time.
I know, but I don't sound like you, Bobby. I don't.
And then, of course, you're walking down the street. And, of course, when we dance mambo, we're doing the same thing. And we dance, and we don't even know it. For example, I'm going like in clave, we go back on the first two notes of the clave like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm moving my arms. So I'm going like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2 with my arms, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 with my legs. But so we're doing polyrhythms and polymeters at the same time, and then you start doing improvisational twirls, etc., etc. But they all have to be in clave. Good mambo dancers always dance in clave. So, but you don't even know that because you're just doing it. It just comes once you learn the basic step and you start getting into it, the music consumes you, etc. But if you, this is all the science of it. But really, it's about soul, feeling, and our African inheritance, polyrhythm and polymeter. The other thing that we inherited from West and Central Africa is the pentatonic scale that we use in the blues, etc. And we use it a lot in what we call salsa today, in the rumba tradition, etc., etc. So now, this polyrhythmic inheritance that we got from Africa, people are looking at me, yeah, so what that, well, African-American music, jazz, what does that have to do with polyrhythm? What we play when we play jazz.
You all don't understand. Now he's about to play us some jazz. This is what happens when you have a legend in the room.
So everybody's heard this, right? A jazz drummer do this. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I do it on the cymbal, slower. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's what we call in jazz the jazz ride. I got 4 on the floor. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 with my feet on top. 1, 2, 3. But this isn't really in 4/4. It's in 6/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Polymeter, polyrhythm. Where do we get it from? West and Central Africa. So that's how it relates to what we do in the African American tradition in jazz. You have to realize, because of the way the 13 colonies were set up, etc., etc., and the fact that white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, okay, looked at the rhythms of Africa, etc., etc., in a completely different way than the Spaniards did. So you have to understand, Spain at one time was an extension of Africa. The Moors were there for almost 900 years, man. So they were part of Africa. They are a multicultural society as well, multiracial society. Wait till you go to Spain and start doing DNA tests over there, man.
Well, and you know, we get a lot of people, a lot of men, when they trace their paternal line, it goes back to Europe and not
Right.
Africa. And when it's Spanish, that's how they justify it. They're like, well, the Moors were in Spain and the Moors were African. So people are very well aware of the Moorish presence.
Right. That's great. That's great. So in terms of African American culture, unfortunately, the founders of the colonies here outlawed drumming, outlawed singing, outlawed speaking in any African tongues, etc., etc. And so in here, the United States, I've always said you cannot deny culture. It will always, Dizzy Gillespie always used to say, and I played with him, he told me one time, listen, Bobby, as long as there's one black person left on planet Earth singing the blues, jazz will never die. And the same thing with this. Here in the with the so-called United States, everything was taken away from our African American brothers and sisters. So they rebirthed their culture in the blues and jazz. You can't sing. You'd be like, your tongue would be cut out if you sang something like a beautiful chant prayer for Yemaya, the goddess, the Yoruba deity of the sea. You can't sing it in the United States, but you could hum the melodies. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. 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 The birth of the blues, etc. And other groups from Africa were brought here too, especially from Senegambia. And the people from Senegambia have an incredible virtuosic history of improvisation. So that was brought over here too. So, and you can't play any hand drums. At one time in New Orleans, Louisiana, you could play hand drums in Congo Square. But once the Civil War started, that was it. That was it. Okay? So you start playing the rhythms on snare drums, tom-toms, bass drums, the invention of the drum set, the only instrument that was invented in the United States by African Americans, okay, in New Orleans. This is a multicultural instrument. The cymbals come from Asian tradition, also from Turkish tradition. The fact that we use pedals is mechanization here, born in the United States from the industrial age. The snare drum from Europe, but there are drums with wires underneath them in West Africa as well. The tom-toms from China, etc. It's a multicultural instrument put together by our African American brothers and sisters. It's the only instrument invented in the United States. Just in case you get asked that on Jeopardy, if you know, what is the only instrument invented in the United States? The drum set. The drum set. Okay, so our African American brothers and sisters transferred all that knowledge of polyrhythm, polymeter, using the pentatonic scale, etc., into instruments like the drums, horns, etc., etc. The birth of the blues, and of course jazz, and all the African diaspora musics that we listen to today, hip hop, funk, rock, heavy metal, all of these things can be traced back completely to Africa. Now imagine if you learned that when you were in school as a young child. Things would be a lot different today amongst young people. People would be looking at each other like in Cuba and Puerto Rico, in Dominican, oye, mi hermano, oye, abure, which is the Yoruba word for brother, sister, you know.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I know that, one of the things that I find striking too about our culture is that when we talk about a form of music, it really doesn't just apply to the music. It applies to the dance. It also applies to the language. And Celia Cruz was a wonderful combination of all of those things. And I wonder, in our remaining time, if you could share with us some of the clips that we
Sure,
had
most perfect.
queued up.
Let's listen to Celia Cruz, the first clip that I've selected, singing to the Yoruba deity Shango, which is the lord of the drum, the dance. He's the ultimate Mac Daddy. He loves women. He loves to party, etc. I'm sorry. Actually, let's skip. Yeah, don't go to the go down. Skip down to I believe the fourth one. The fifth one. The fifth one is Celia Cruz singing.
So you want her to go to Celia Cruz singing for Shango?
That one, exactly.
Okay. There we go.
Hopefully it'll start.
Yeah, we'll get it.
In any case,
Here we go.
okay, hit the arrow play button. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. No, no. That's the wrong tune.
Okay, you want this one? Celia Cruz, Canta a Shango.
That's it.
Okay, I can. Okay, I can pull it up.
Great.
Here we go.
This is a very common song. If anybody's a santero, they know this song. That's
Here we
it.
go.
It's the rhythm of Lempe. Get the shekere, chord. Fantastic. So she is interesting. It's interesting about Celia because she was not an initiate in the religion, but she did these recordings because she learned these songs as a child when she was growing up in La Habana. So it's part of the culture, just like I did when I was growing up in the South Bronx. You go by somebody's house on a Saturday or a Sunday, and you hear drums, and they're coming from a basement, and you go, "Wow, man, what's that music? Man, it's really some intense stuff." You go in, you start, and you see a ceremony filled with people of all different colors that are believers in the religion, and it's just inspiring. So, and this is part of our cultural being as Latinos, particularly if you're Puerto Rican, Cuban, and or Dominican. It's just part and parcel of our culture. Because people look at me sometimes, they go, "Man, Bobby, how do you know about this stuff?" I go, "Man, I grew up with it, man. It's part of my culture, just like I grew up with Marvin Gaye." So it is what it is.
People is who you are. It's part of your soul.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And I'm just lucky that I grew up where I grew up at the time period that I grew up in the South Bronx in the 70s, when everything was burning to the ground, but all of this culture and music was keeping us all of us alive in one way or another. Now, you wanted me to talk a little bit about the rumba tradition. Since we don't have a lot of time, let me take. There's three main forms of rumba. If any of your especially the students that are watching this right now. First of all, the word, as I said before, rumba. And just so that you know, if you want to write it down, anybody, what you just heard there was bembe, B-E-M-B-E with an accent over it. The word means celebration, ceremony, and praise of the deities in the Yoruba tradition. There's other ways to praise the Yoruba deities other than the rhythm that you just heard. For example, we can use these drums over here. The ceremonial bata drums that are of Yoruba tradition. But that's for another that's for another broadcast. Maybe I'll play them for you a little bit just so you could hear a little bit of them. Those drums over there, the bata, are our closest link to Africa, besides the conga drum and the shekeres, etc. Now, the rumba tradition develops mainly in the late 19th century. From 1868 to 1878, there was a revolution in Cuba. If you go to Cuba, you will see a statue in the center of La Habana. You'll see a gentleman by the name of Manuel Céspedes, who, if you look at him, he goes, oh, it's a European dude, dressed in clothing of the time period from the 19th century. And on the bottom of the statue says, Manuel Céspedes, padre de la revolución cubana. He's the father of the first Cuban revolution. And what happened was at the time that Americans were coming in, modernizing and building sugar plantations with machinery, tobacco plantations, et cetera, et cetera. And Manuel Céspedes went to the governor of Cuba and said, hey, you're allowing this to happen. What about us? We're Cubans, et cetera. So he says, take it up with the king and queen of Spain, who basically told him, sorry, there's nothing you can do about it. So he said, oh yeah? Okay, I'm going to free all of my slaves. So he basically starts a civil war in Cuba. And he becomes an abolitionist. Mm-hmm. And from 1868 to 1878, drums were outlawed in Cuba. You couldn't play them because people thought that they were be used to communicate, etc. The revolutionaries. The revolutionaries were called Mambis or Mambises, which is the Bantu Congolese word for somebody who's a lowlife. But they took that word and used it as a badge of honor. Okay? And people would say, tú estás con la revolución. And you would say, yes, yo soy Mambise. Are you down with the revolution, et cetera, et cetera. So for 10 years, there's no drumming with these drums, conga drums, right? But then we used, what they did was, people of African descent, they're very creative, as always. Human beings, always, when they're put up against a wall or something, they come up with solutions to a problem. So they said, okay, we won't use drums. We'll use wooden crates to drum on. So they take a codfish box that they unload from a ship, the dock workers. After they empty it out, they sit on it and use it as a drum. They take a wooden shoe box, use that as the high-pitched drum, the quinto. They take 2 spoons with the thumbs inside and strike a little cigar box, turned upside down with the lid off, for what we call the cascara, the timeline. And then for the clave, the sticks that play the timeline, or sticks like this. They take wooden pegs and shave them down. Clavijas, wooden pegs, shave them down and create this to play rhythm on it. So the first video that you're going to see is a recreation of that style, which is the first style of rumba, Yambu, that Celia Cruz heard when she was a little girl growing up in La Habana. It's slow, it's a dance of elders, and it's a man and woman representing a rooster and a hen dancing, okay? And check out how there's a wordless vocalese intro called La Diana in the top of the song. It comes from Arabic, Muslim, Hebraic, and Efik tradition. All of those cultures in that represented in that vocalese intro that you're going to hear at the top. So the very first video that you have there, play it. And you'll get to see a little bit of the Yambu. as it was played in the 19th century.
Okay.
When drumming was outlawed.
Blair's on it.
Okay. The lyrics are mostly in Spanish.
La 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 la. La 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 la.
There's La Diana, the wordless intro.
La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Vamos a ver, sintiendo lo no profundo, sintiendo lo no profundo, de este yambú yo sentía esta linda melodía que nace del corazón. Óyalo bien, óyelo bien. Pero óiganlo bien.
Remember to dance for elders. Representing a rooster and a hen.
Qué bueno
Now we get to the montuno, call and response.
Morena de la mamía, vamos a ver, el yambú no se vacuna. Oye, morena, yo a ti te quiero. Yambú, yambú, yambú de tiempo España. El yambú palomar y va, dilo ahora hasta mañana. Yambú, yambú, que me muero. Vamos a ver mi china con dientes de oro. Caballero, dime quién te lo compró. Yambú, yambú de los cajones. Oye, yambú, yambú, que me muero. Caballero, el yambú no se vacuna. Yambú de tiempo España. Oye, minera.
Okay. So we can stop it there. Africa and Spain together. When you unite two cultures, when two cultures meet, what do you get? A new culture. Okay?
Right.
So, and you saw the man extending his arm, that like a bird, like a rooster extending its wing, etc., etc. It's a dance for elders, very elegant. Although today, the younger generation, when they play yambú, I think they play it a little bit too fast. The word yambú means conversation. It's the Bantu Congolese word for conversations. And you heard the lead singer, which is known as a gallo or the rooster or akbom in Yoruba. He was saying, en el yambú no se vacuna. In the yambú, there is no vacuneo, which comes later in the guaguancó, the pelvic thrust by the man, symbolizing sexual conquest. It's a rooster and a hen, but symbolizing sexual content. All these steps got transferred to what we call mambo dancing, salsa dancing. People do them, they don't even realize where it comes from. Okay? Just been handed down visually to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation, etc.
And it was very African. I mean, I was reminded of all kinds of dances that come across my timeline on Instagram
Good.
to Afro beats. So we are it's a clear demonstration of how connected we all are, for sure.
Imagine Celia Cruz or anybody at that time growing up with that, or myself growing up in the South Bronx, checking that out. And
Yeah.
and you looked at the group of drummers and singers. They're all different colors.
Mm-hmm.
They're all different colors. The woman is wearing and the woman dance. Both women, the woman singing background vocals and the woman wearing the dress. Those dresses come from Spain, directly from Spain.
Wow.
The vocalese, directly from southern Spain, from flamenco tradition, which comes from Arabic tradition, Muslim tradition, and Hebraic tradition. You want to learn a little bit about how to do vocalese in the rumba? Go on a Friday night and hear a Jewish cantor sing, or an imam at a Muslim temple singing. Okay?
Wow.
We have many more things in common than differences, etc. And what unites us is basically Africa. It's a beautiful thing. People need to learn about that. Be proud of that, okay? Because our culture is very complex, but it's very simple at the same time. It's the union of different cultures, races coming together. Now, after 1878, the revolution is finally over. Slavery has been abolished for people of African descent on the island of Cuba. Okay? The drumming that you heard has roots in Bantu Congolese and Spanish vocalese. Okay? The dancing has roots in Africa, but also in Spain, southern Spain as well. Now, drums can be played again in public, what we know as conga drums. And we get the second style of rumba developed, guaguancó, which I heard growing up when I was a kid in the South Bronx. So you would have 3 drummers, each playing a single drum. You have the clave, which maintains the rhythmic integrity of the music, which comes from West Africa. Unbelievable that happened, but sometimes stuff happens.
Listen, you get more of a workout in between playing the drums than you do actually playing them.
Right. So you heard the man playing the spoons on the little box, the cigar box. Now you play on a piece of bamboo. Okay. Now remember, when they were playing yambu, drumming was outlawed. So when they heard drumming, the police, and they would come in, somebody would be looking out. And when somebody would see the police coming, they would sing this. Aquí entre las flores. It was saying, stop. And you always end with that. Here amongst the flowers, right? Everybody would know that the cops were coming, etc. And the cops come in, they say, hey, who's playing drums here? And these black people of Cuban descent are going in the Solares, the old slave tenements in La Habana, and in Matanzas go, you know, say, oficial, aquí no hay nadie tocando tambores. Nobody's playing drums here. They're sitting on wooden crates or playing, they got wooden crates. You see people go, you see any drums? No, I don't see any. You see any drums? The cops would get pissed, But sometimes the cops would join in. Okay, so many accounts of that.
Wow.
But 1870, the power of music. 1878, slavery ends in Cuba. What does the Cuban and Spanish government do? They bring about 150 to 180,000 of our Chinese brothers and sisters to Cuba to replace the black workforce, and they make them indentured servants. They're finally freed in 1886. So if you come to New York City and you see a Chinese Cuban restaurant, we still only have a few left. Those are the descendants.
Okay. And that's some of the best food ever. That food is delicious.
Those are the descendants of Chinese people in Cuba that were at one time slaves. They were indentured servants. Yeah. So if you get to go to Cuba, in Havana, go to Sanjat, Sanja. That's Chinatown in Havana. And you might see people playing you're going, how come those Chinese people play those conga drums that way or whatever, playing rumba? You go, man, that's their culture, man. They grew up with it. They grew up with it. So you have the person with the spoons playing the little cigar box, but now you play on a piece of bamboo. The clave, somebody's playing the clave. All right? That's not the only pattern. There are many different patterns. For example, etc., etc. Right? It all depends on the person playing this piece of bamboo that's called guagua. Guagua. Right? Then you have three drums. The salidor. Salidor comes from the word in Spanish salir, which means to exit out first. Okay? Then we have the conga drum, which is the middle drum that plays what we call the tres golpes or tres dos, or sometimes it's called llamadora, seguidora. It has many different names, but the most common name when it plays in the rumba tradition in what we call guaguancó, which is developed after the revolution eradicates slavery, is tres golpes or tres dos, three strokes. All right, and then you have the quinto, which is improvising against that, and two people dancing, a man and a woman, and the man does pelvic thrusts, simulating like he's trying to sexually conquer the woman. Okay, so what does that represent? Fertility, fertility, fertility. All right. So here's Havana style guaguancó. Listen to the melody, everybody. So next time you come to New York City in Central and you hear the Central Park Rumba on 72nd Street in Central Park West near the lake, you can tell what type of guaguancó it is. This is Havana style guaguancó. Okay, again, the melody's just slow so everybody can get it. That's Havana style guaguancó. Then the city across the bay, Matanza style guaguancó. There's a different melody with the conga drums. One less note. I'll do it slow. Okay, so the quinto is soloing against that melody while the vocals are happening. The person is playing the clave, the guy or the lead singer, and then you have a man and a woman. So if we look at the video, let's look at the video of Matanza style guaguancó, so you can check it out. And now remember, Celia Cruz is growing up listening to all of this stuff.
This is amazing. You know, I'm from DC, where we have go-go.
And you hear it in there in go-go, yeah. Okay, this is Matanza style guaguancó. But pay attention to the dancers.
But we can't hear it.
So we need to get the volume up.
Maybe you try it again, Blair. So we can get the sound. Here, I'll see if I can do it on my side. Oh, you got it.
The high-pitched drum is the quinto. Dancers have to follow the quinto. Same thing, a rooster and a hen. That was a bacuneo right there. She covers her private parts. That was the bacuneo right there. Yeah. You can cut it now. Great. So that's an example of matanza style. Guaguancó, you heard the particular melody of the drums. That melody. If it was Havana style, you would hear this. Etc., etc. Okay, great. Now, the last style of rumba is very interesting. Some of the women watching this might get a little offended because it is particularly a male-dominated art form. It is known as Rumba Colombia. It developed in Matanzas at a train stop called Colombia. Matanzas is the city across the bay from La Habana, another hotbed of African Cuban culture. And the dock workers would unload the ships there and put the wares of the ship on, loading them on to the railroad cars. Okay? It's also a famous bus stop. Now, who's there with the dock workers? There's no women. Only who? Women of the night. Prostitutes. Okay. So how did they pass the time? They developed this intense challenge style known as Rumba Colombia. Just men play it, just men dance it, and just men sing it. except for one woman who was allowed to dance because she was such a badass dancer. She could outdance the men. A woman named Andrea Barro. Andrea Barro, who many rumberos, when they sing, they pay homage to her sometimes. There are some of these mythical figures from the rumba tradition, like Macho Mumba, Andrea Barro, etc., Michilan, etc., etc. Andrea Barro is one of them. Now, Rumba Colombia is the most African of the rumbas. The basic pulse is this: a strong feeling of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me move this a little because I'm having a little equipment failure here. Okay, let me fix it again. Oh, there you go. Strong feeling of 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. Okay, so that's going on, and the men come out one by one, and they try to outdo each other. Is the early form of what? A cipher in hip hop. But now women are dancing, being allowed to dance Colombia, etc. And you're going to get to see some of that now. Now, when I was in Mongo Santa Maria's band, when I was his drummer and timbalero, Nancy, his daughter, he used to get mad because she would dance Rumba Colombia. And he'd be yelling at her, "Oye, Nancy, coño, ¿qué es lo que te pasa?" And, you know, and she would just laugh at him. But, you know, those old ties of the male masculinity, et cetera, combined with a little bit of misogyny, unfortunately, are hard to break. But now women in Cuba are doing it. They're dancing Rumba Colombia. So you're going to get to see some of that right now. So look up the video that says Palenque, Palenque. It's the last video. And you'll see the men challenging each other. Imagine you're back in the docks in the 50s in Cuba, early 20th century.
Oh, no.
Somebody else is going to come out and dance. Another guy. Now check it out. Check out what happens. all about trying to outdo each other, just like in the cypher in hip hop.
Yeah. Bobby, I think he's winning.
Let's see what happens.
Oh, wow.
And you heard them saying at the end, "Aquí entre las flores," that phrase that I sang before, which is a carryover from the colonial period when the police would come. You know, so they still sing that. And you know, at the end, what you saw there, very similar to what tap dancers used to do at the Apollo Theater. They're all trying to outdo each other, and at the very end, they come out, you know, and shuffle out, and in unison. So if you took some of the old films of the Mills Brothers, not the Nicholas Brothers, and took off the sound of the music that was, and put rumba underneath, you'd be looking and you'd be going, man, some of the steps, they're just like similar. They're just, the same movements, except it's what Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, used to say, the collective unconscious. It just keeps passing down all these traditions, and they're in your unconscious. You don't even know. They just have to be reawakened, and somehow, okay. Here in the United States, they were reborn with blues and the jazz, and of course tap dancing and everything else, and flash dancing and all that kind of stuff. In Cuba, they're represented in this. In Puerto Rico, my ancestral homeland, They're represented by the bomba and plena traditions, those complexes, etc., etc.
Bobby, you have been an amazing source of knowledge. Listen, I got far more than I could have ever imagined. I feel like I just want to bow down and honor you, your experience, your wisdom, your knowledge, your generosity, your talent, all of your beauty, all of that just
Oh, thank you.
flowed through to us here tonight. And you went far above. And this is I'm going to venture to say this is the best live we've had, certainly of this year, but maybe ever.
Thank
I
you.
really, 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 and I know that everybody has been dropping in the comments. There's been so much fire, so much. He's amazing. So many wows. I mean, you took us to school tonight, and there's nobody who's going to watch this video, this conversation, and ever question whether or not there's an African influence on anything that anybody creates with any instrument
Let
or
me let
any
me
part of their body.
let me tell you something. Let's close off with the king and queen of what has become known as salsa. I'm talking about the master blaster, the ultimate New Yorican, Maestro Tito Puente, who was indeed a full-fledged child of Obatala in Santeria in Ifa. He made Ocha, which is the complete initiation, and his head was owned by Obatala, who is the Yoruba deity of creativity, of all artists, the creator of life on earth, okay, and the oldest of the Orisha, the super beings. You know, people, I crack up because people, you see these Marvel superheroes in these movies, and also, like the mighty Thor, and Iron Man, and all these Spider-Man, and all these things. But we have our own superheroes, like
Yes, we
Shango,
do.
the
Yes,
Lord of
we
the
do.
Drum, Yemaya, the goddess of the sea, Ochun, the goddess of the sweet rivers and love, Babaluaye, the deity of pestilence, and the patron of all those who have afflictions, etc., etc. Ochosi, the hunter. You see the police coming. Oh, somebody in our culture goes, oh, there goes Ochosi. He's looking for customers, man. Watch out. So, I mean, we have all these deities. We have all these superheroes within our own culture that have kept us alive and brought us together in many, many ways. Like you saw the people dancing there in El Palenque in Cuba, they're dancing the Rumba Colombia. They were all different shades of colors, all of them, united by what? The culture. Yeah. So let's listen to a little bit of Celia Cruz, who grew up with all of this culture and just would evoke it in full force every time she went on stage. So let's listen to her and Maestro Tito Puente in a tune called La Guarachera, which was her nickname, La Guarachera. Guaracha is a fast form of Cuban music, pre-mambo, that always is used to uplift the crowd, etc. The Guaracha style. So let's listen to Celia Cruz with the arranging talents of Maestro Tito Puente, a native New Yorican son, and not only his arrangement, but he plays a big timbales solo at the very end, and he trades with Maestra Celia Cruz. Two masters at the top of their game, evoking the union of Puerto Rico, Cuba, and of course our African ancestry in full force.
And from one master at the top of his game to teaching us about these two masters, I just want to make sure before anyone drops off that you know that Bobby has a show on WBGO. You can get it online, WBGO.org, called the Latin Jazz Cruise, Friday nights from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can hear all of these lessons in full force right there at WBGO.org.
And if you missed the show, no worries, because it's archived for 2 weeks. if you missed the show on Friday night, or you can't listen in real time, or you want to listen to it again, starting on Saturday, just go to WBGO Latin Jazz Cruise, CRUISE, and you can hear it in the archives, as well as the previous week's show. But let's check out Maestro Tito Puente, a son of Harlem. Maestro Puente was always hip. Anytime they asked him in interviews, Spanish, English, whatever, ¿de dónde tú eres, Maestro Puente? He would always say, I'm from Harlem. You know? From Harlem, East Harlem, Spanish Harlem, El Barrio. Always would be proud and say that. And I must say, Maestro Puente was so loved by the African-American community in New York City. It was ridiculous, man. You talk to somebody working at the post office who was African-American, and you'd go, hey, you got those Tito Puente stamps that they just put up? He goes, sorry, my brother, they're sold out. In fact, I bought half of them, you know? You know, he was so loved, and as was Celia Cruz. So, but let's listen to both masters at the top of their game.
Abran paso que aquí traigo yo en mi voz un saludo cordial. Guarachera me llama la gente, yo con Tito Puente voy a guarachar. Vengan todos a oírme cantar con mi coro que viene allá atrás. Yo sí soy guarachera consciente y este rico ambiente me pone a inspirar. Guarachera, bongo, bongo, rumba buena. Guarachera, bongo, me llaman la guarachera. Guarachera, bongo, 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 bongo. Guarachera, bongo, 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 que la rumba. Vaya guarachar. Oye, Tito Puente, guarachea conmigo a veces es verdad, chico. Briquitipo, briquitipo. Placo tu cupa, placo tu cupa. Cupa, 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 cupa. Este niño, ¿estás en algo? ¡Ay, Dios mío! ¡Guarachera! ¡Qué bongo, 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 rumba buena! ¡Guarachera y qué guarachera, bongo! ¡Ay, bongo, la rumba, la rumba, la zumba! ¡Vámonos para allá!
Everybody who's joining us, let me see it in the comments. Give me some hand claps, some flags, some Puerto Rican flags, some Cuban flags, some fire for the legendary Bobby Sanabria. He graced us and literally blessed us tonight with this, what Master Coupe said best, this musical genealogy session. Bobby, I cannot thank you enough. I am so excited about your African ancestry. We're going to trace your father's side to see where your paternal grandmother's roots go back to, because I know for sure after this, not that I had any question before, but it's unquestionable now that we're going to find the funkiest, most rhythmic, most soulful tribe on the continent. That's where your roots are going to be from. Thank you again and again for joining us and sharing just so much of your time with us tonight. You are a treasure.
Thank you.
Beyond,
And if anybody
beyond
has
us.
any questions, you can always reach me on Facebook, private message me if you have any questions, etc.
What are you on Facebook? Are you just Bobby Sanabria?
Bobby Sanabria. I have a fan page and I have a regular personal page. So go to the personal page and private PM me there if you have any questions, or you can send them to Gina and she could forward them to me. You know,
Yeah,
so.
we'll make sure we get them to you. Everybody, thank you for joining us tonight. You have been I don't know if you guys were, a lot of the time I put the camera just on Bobby so that I could be dancing in my seat and you all wouldn't laugh at me. I'm sure you were dancing in your seats too. Listen, we are still in the middle of a pandemic, and so please continue to social distance. Please continue to wear your masks. Please continue to take care of your mental health, support your mental health and that of those you love. And until we meet again, may you be happy, may you be healthy, and may you be whole. See you next week.
And remember, the pandemic is only temporary. The music and our collective culture is always forever and always gives us strength. So be kind to one another. Supposedly, Plato said that. My mother used to tell me that all the time. So maybe, but please be kind to one another, especially now that we have a new change in management in the White House. So let's all, yeah, let's all move forward. Muchas gracias a todo el mundo que estaban en sintonía aquí. Muchas gracias a AfricanAncestry.com y mucho H, alafia a unir a todo el mundo. Los vemos en la próxima. Bye bye, everybody.
Good night.